If you have ever tried intermittent fasting and still felt painfully hungry, shaky, or mentally exhausted by late morning, I want you to listen very carefully, because what you are experiencing is not a lack of discipline, and it is not because your body is weak. Picture this. It's around 11 a.m. You have not eaten since last night. Your stomach feels empty, your focus is slipping, and you keep glancing at the clock, counting the minutes until you are allowed to eat again. You tell yourself this is just part of fasting. You sip black coffee, but deep down you feel anxious. Am I breaking my fast? Am I doing this wrong? And then you go online looking for answers. One expert tells you any calories will ruin your fast. Another says coffee is fine. Someone else swears by bone broth, while another claims protein destroys all fasting benefits. The more you search, the more confused you become. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Fasting has been turned into a test of suffering, when it was never meant to be one. And the reason so many people struggle is not because fasting is impossible, but because most people have been taught to focus on the wrong thing from the very beginning. You have probably noticed this already. The moment you start fasting, the rules seem to multiply. One article insists that any calories at all will break a fast, no exceptions. Another claims black coffee is perfectly safe, while a different source warns that even coffee can spike insulin. Some people recommend sipping bone broth to get through hunger, while others say protein shuts down all the benefits of fasting instantly. It feels overwhelming, and honestly, a little ridiculous, because if fasting were truly this fragile, humans could never have survived long periods without food. Yet here we are, buried under conflicting advice, second-guessing every sip we take. The real problem is not that people disagree. The real problem is that most of these conversations are happening without a shared understanding of what actually matters during a fast. When you do not know what your body is responding to, every opinion sounds equally convincing, and every decision feels risky. Here is the good news, and it is simpler than you have been led to believe. You do not need to memorize endless lists of allowed and forbidden foods. You do not need to fear every calorie or second-guess every sip of coffee. What you need is to understand one core biological concept that determines whether fasting is working or not. Once you understand this, the confusion fades. Suddenly, all those arguments you see online start to make sense. You can look at any food or drink and know, with confidence, whether it supports your fast or interferes with it. This is not about willpower. This is about understanding how your body decides what fuel to burn. And to see that clearly, we need to take a step back and look at how your body produces energy when food is no longer coming in. When you eat regularly, your body runs on a very predictable system. Every meal is broken down into glucose, a form of sugar that enters your bloodstream and gets delivered to your cells for energy. This is your body's preferred fuel source when food is available, because it is fast, efficient, and easy to use. As long as glucose keeps coming in, your body has no reason to look elsewhere. But when you stop eating, your body does not panic. It does not shut down. It adapts. Your brain alone requires a constant supply of energy to function, so your body switches to a backup system that has kept humans alive through famines and food shortages for thousands of years. It turns to stored body fat. That fat is sent to your liver, where it is converted into molecules called ketones. These ketones become an alternative fuel source for both your brain and your body. In fact, during fasting, ketones can provide a significant portion of your brain's energy needs. Some researchers even believe the brain functions more efficiently on ketones than on glucose. This is the state fasting is designed to create, a metabolic shift where your body moves from burning sugar to burning fat. Keep that idea in mind, because everything else in this discussion depends on what allows that shift to happen and what prevents it. Here is the critical piece most people never learn. There is one hormone that determines whether your body can access stored fat or not, and that hormone is insulin. Think of insulin as a switch. When insulin levels are high, your fat cells are locked. The fat stays trapped inside, and your body continues burning glucose instead, even if you have plenty of fat available. When insulin levels drop, that switch flips. The fat cells open. Fat is released into your bloodstream, sent to the liver, and converted into ketones. This is the metabolic switch that makes fasting powerful. Now here is where many people get misled. Sugar and carbohydrates raise insulin quickly. Protein also raises insulin, though usually to a lesser degree. But fat, on its own, has almost no impact on insulin levels. So the real question during fasting is not whether something has calories. The real question is whether it raises insulin enough to shut down fat burning. If fasting were simply about 0 calories, humans would never have survived long periods without food. The body was designed to run on fat when insulin stays low. This is where fasting needs to be redefined. Fasting is not a contest of who can suffer the longest without food. It is not about forcing yourself through hunger while counting every calorie with anxiety. Fasting is about keeping insulin low enough for your body to stay in fat-burning mode. Once you see it this way, a lot of fear disappears. You realize that certain things you were told to avoid at all costs are not automatically ruining your fast. Calories alone do not decide whether fat burning stops. Hormones do. And insulin is the hormone that matters most. This is why 2 people can fast the same number of hours and get completely different results. One stays calm, focused, and energized. The other feels miserable and depleted. The difference is not discipline. It is whether the metabolic switch stays flipped. Hold on to that idea, because now we can finally look at the specific things people argue about and understand why some of them actually support fasting instead of breaking it. Now that you understand the role insulin plays, a lot of the confusion around fasting begins to clear. We can stop asking whether something has calories and start asking a more useful question. Does this raise insulin enough to shut down fat burning and ketone production? With that lens, let's look at the most debated items. Take MCT oil, for example. MCT stands for medium-chain triglycerides, a special type of fat that your body processes very differently from most fats. Unlike butter or olive oil, which take a long digestive journey before reaching the liver, MCTs are absorbed quickly and sent straight there. When MCT oil arrives at the liver, it actively pushes ketone production forward, even when conditions are not perfect. This is why many people find that a small amount, typically around 1 tablespoon, can increase mental clarity and steady energy during a fast. If you are new to it, start with a teaspoon and work up slowly, because too much too soon can upset your stomach. Black coffee and unsweetened tea work through a different mechanism. They contain virtually no calories and do not trigger an insulin response. But more importantly, they provide compounds called polyphenols that support your mitochondria, the energy-producing structures inside your cells. Coffee does not just not break a fast. It can actually enhance fat burning. Green tea offers similar benefits, with a calmer, more sustained focus for those sensitive to caffeine. The key, of course, is keeping them plain. The moment sugar enters the picture, insulin follows. Then there is soluble fiber, found in things like psyllium husk. Your body cannot digest it, so it does not provide usable calories. Instead, it feeds your gut bacteria, which release signals that reduce hunger and help you feel satisfied. You are not feeding yourself, you are feeding your microbiome. And that distinction matters. Even heavy cream, in very small amounts, can fit within this framework. It is almost entirely fat, with minimal sugar or protein, meaning it has little effect on insulin. The mistake is excess. 1 tablespoon may be supportive. Turning your coffee into a creamy dessert is not. This is where context matters, and where a lot of confusion comes from. Not all fasting goals are the same, and the rules change depending on what you are trying to achieve. If your primary goal is fat loss and metabolic health, small amounts of protein, such as a cup of bone broth or a scoop of collagen, may slightly reduce the depth of your fast, but still allow fat burning to continue. For many people, that trade-off is worth it if it helps them stay consistent. However, if your goal is maximizing autophagy, the cellular repair and recycling process that increases during fasting, protein becomes a bigger issue. Autophagy is far more sensitive to protein intake than ketone production is. Even modest amounts can dial it back. This does not mean one approach is right and the other is wrong. It means fasting should be aligned with your intention. When you understand what you are optimizing for, the decisions become clearer, and you stop feeling like every small choice is a mistake. Before bringing everything together, there is one important line that should never be crossed. Fasting is a powerful metabolic tool, but it is not appropriate for everyone, and it should never come at the expense of your safety. If you are pregnant or breastfeeding, if you have a history of eating disorders, if you have diabetes and use insulin, if you have kidney disease, or if you are underweight, fasting should only be considered under medical supervision. For anyone practicing fasting, your body will also tell you when something is wrong. Persistent dizziness that does not improve with hydration, heart palpitations, confusion, or ongoing nausea are signals to stop, not to push harder. Ending a fast is not a failure. It is a sign that you are paying attention. Fasting works best when it is approached with awareness, not extremism, and with respect for the signals your body sends. When you step back and look at the full picture, fasting becomes far less intimidating. The goal was never 0 calories, and it was never about proving how much discomfort you can tolerate. The real goal is keeping your body in a state where fat burning and ketone production can continue. Once you understand that, many of the fears that surround fasting simply fall away. You realize that hunger is not always a signal of failure. You realize that certain foods and drinks are not enemies, but tools when used with intention. And most importantly, you stop blaming yourself for struggles that were never about willpower in the first place. Fasting works best when it is guided by understanding, not rigid rules. When you know why your body responds the way it does, you gain flexibility without losing effectiveness. You move from anxiety to confidence, from confusion to clarity. And that shift alone can make fasting sustainable instead of stressful. And if you think fasting is simply about skipping meals, the first 24 hours inside your body may completely change how you see it. During that time, powerful biological shifts begin to unfold. Shifts that affect your energy, your hormones, and even the way your brain functions. This is where many people either quit or finally understand why fasting can feel so different when it is done correctly. That is what we are going to explore next. What actually happens inside your body hour by hour when food disappears, and why those changes matter far more than the clock on the wall. Once you see that process clearly, fasting stops being a mystery and starts becoming a skill.